the dishonor, the pain of it all. All at once, Hideo realizes what has happened. They didn't find the other body in time. Welcome to Haunted Places. I'm Greg Polson. Every Thursday, I take you to the scariest, eeriest, most haunted, real places on Earth. This week, join me on a supernatural journey to Aokigahara Jukai, or the Sea of Trees, the second most popular suicide spot in the world. To this day, it's haunted. If you can't get enough haunted places, don't forget to subscribe. You can find us on your favorite podcast directory, as well as on Facebook and Instagram at Parcast, and on Twitter at Parcast Network. If you like what you hear, please leave a 5-star review, wherever you're listening. 1,200 years ago, Mount Fuji erupted for 10 days. The lava flowed down the mountain's northwestern side and divided the great Sanaumi Lake in half. In time, from this wasteland of fire and smoke, trees began to grow. The igneous rock soon played host to over 3,000 acres of dense green forest. It isn't known when the forest known as Aokigahara became associated with death. Japanese spiritualism is profoundly complicated, with spirits and yokai, mysterious creatures that can work good or evil in the world, believed to be dwelling in both cities and the most remote of places. What we do know is that when you walk into Aokigahara, it quickly grows dark. Though the forest is young in geological and botanical terms, it is dense, quickly blocking the light from the moss and root-covered forest floor. Hikers often bring tape with them. Starting at the entrance to the trail, they hang colorful ribbons on trees in order to find their way back. The lava absorbs sound, making one feel submerged and alone, even in daylight. It's this isolation that gives the forest its other name, Jukai, the Sea of Trees. Is it any wonder that people say they hear voices in the woods? Some say that a novel published in the 1960s by acclaimed writer Seicho Matsumoto established Aokigahara's status as a locus for pain and sorrow. But the locals say that the yurei, or ghosts, took up residence long ago, when honor and duty converged to force families to make an awful choice. The Tenpo famine was never-ending. For 2 long years they'd been starving. The rumbling of empty stomachs was a common sound at the dinner table, as the whole family shared food as best they could. There were 8 of them. The parents and maternal set of grandparents took as little as they could to ensure that the 4 children got more than their fair share. But even those portions were getting smaller. They'd endured the floods, but the cold had done the crops in. After the children had gone to bed, it was time for the adults to talk. Shoji, the patriarch, spoke first. His words were barely above a whisper. He'd lived a long life, a good life. At 63, he had seen his share of natural disasters and invading foreigners. It was a life worth living, and, he argued, it was time for his life to come to a close. Plenty of other villagers had left their eldest on mountains and hills to wait for death. There was an honor in it. It was a noble action, sacrificing an old life to keep the younger ones fed. His son, Tatsuzo, did not share his sentiments. Shoji and Tatsuzo worked alongside each other and provided the family with the majority of their food. They couldn't afford to lose him. They argued through the night, their tempers fueled by the hunger in their stomachs. In the morning, Etsuko, Tatsuzo's mother, stood next to the paper doors. Tatsuzo asked her if she was certain She nodded her head. Shoji placed a tender kiss on his wife's cheek. A goodbye. Etsuko and Tatsuzo walked away from the village and toward the dense forest. Tatsuzo's shoulders sagged with the weight of his responsibility. There was honor in this type of death, but it was not an enviable position to be in. Etsuko had a slight smile on her thin lips as she walked with her son. The promise of food for her beloved grandchildren was enough for her to meet death. She could make this trade for them, her life for a little hope, until this horrible famine was over. A thick blanket of fog swallowed the trees as they moved toward the mountain. They had trouble seeing above them, but the ground was clear. Wordlessly, Etsuko paused, bending down to the forest floor. Tatsuzo stopped, watching her with a silent sadness. She was gathering sticks. Tatsuzo was confused, half dazed from the weight of his heart, the closeness of the forest and the fog. She didn't look up at him, focused on her work. He didn't know what to say. She finally finished, and they began walking again. As they moved further into the green dark, she began to break the sticks in half and threw them on the ground. "So you may find your way home," she reassured Tatsuzo. His smile did not reach his eyes, but he bowed his head in a gesture of thanks. The sticks formed a haphazard path as the two ventured further and further through the dense crush of twisted trees. The silence stretched between them as they both readied themselves for what was to come. As they approached the base of the sacred Mount Fuji, Tatsuzo lifted Etsuko onto his back. His stomach growled in protest as he used his last reserves of energy to keep Etsuko firmly seated on top of his shoulders. Her wrinkled hands clung to his chest tightly. It was the only hint for him that she wasn't quite as ready as she appeared. As they reached the top of the mountain, he lowered her back down. His back ached and his knees shook, but he tried to stand tall for her. She placed a comforting hand on his cheek. He bent his head out of respect. "Go," she whispered. He bowed long and deep, only turning away when the terrain demanded it. Etsuko watched as her son's shape retreated farther and farther away. When he was but a tiny speck nearing the forest once more, she decided to sit down. The hunger pangs came first. She'd been so focused on the journey this morning, she hadn't been able to feel her stomach yet. Now it roared, as though it were a tiger trying to break free from the confines of her skin. The thirst came next. Her mouth lost its moisture slowly. Each swallow felt thicker as the scant saliva tried to coat her throat. She licked her cracked lips to bring some moisture back to them. It wasn't enough. Her tongue yearned for water, trying to pull droplets from the air. But there was no comfort. She spent the night under the stars, waiting for death to take her. Her body throbbed with pain. How much suffering must she endure? A blinding headache stole her vision from her as she awoke. She could no longer tell if it was day or night. Amidst the silence, any noise jumped out at her. She wanted company or entertainment, something that would make the wait easier. The wind blew, filling her mind with chilling scenarios. Perhaps Tatsuzo had gotten lost and was now suffering the same fate. Had the trail been enough? The family would only have one laborer to call on. The children could be struck with an illness that their malnourished bodies wouldn't be able to fight. Her daughter-in-law would be exhausted and grow sick too. Her family would die, and it was all her fault. No, it was too much to bear. In a fit of panic, Atsuko raised her creaking body and ran down the path. Her lungs burned and her stomach ached. Her heart was pounding. She forgot about the broken sticks and tripped. Her body flew through the air. Exhausted, arthritic fingers clung to the edge of a ridge. She didn't want to die. She wasn't ready to make this sacrifice. There was more for her to do to ensure her family's safety. But the mountain was empty. No one would come. And then the whispers started. They were soft at first, a tickle against her ear. Over the wind, she could hear the merest suggestion, "Come down to us." The spirits had never seen fit to call to her before. They grew louder. "You have failed. Let go." Their voices surged like a loud yell. "Fall." But Atsuko clung desperately as the wind swelled and swirled around her. She fought with everything she had. "Join us," the voices called. For minutes on end, a roaring of their words reverberated in her ears. "Your pain nourishes us. Your sorrow gives us strength. We are inside and around you. We are the air you breathe and the wind that burns on the mountaintop. We are the scorching sun and the blood moon. We are infinite and you are mortal. We will wait and you will die." Etsuko's fingers dug harder into the side of the cliff, but a gust of wind took her by surprise, slamming her body into the mountain. With a scream, her grip loosened, and she fell. Her neck broke with a brittle crack as her body hit the forest floor. They had stolen her honorable death away and trapped her in the in-between. The white snow had gone gray. The forest far below was a deathly white. She would not be able to return to her family during Oban. Now there was only the darkness, the cold, blinding light, and the wind. She released her own deafening scream. Somewhere, far away, Tetsuzo heard a whisper and stepped off the path. The practice of ubasute, or abandonment of a parent, appears in Japanese art as early as the 19th century. Although there may have been some real cases, many scholars believe it was simply folklore or a societal metaphor. In recent years, a combination of a growing elderly population and a severe economic crisis has created a new form of ubasute, where adults drop their sick parents off at so-called senior citizen postboxes and never see them again. Our story will continue in a moment, right after the break. It's not a Parcast podcast, but if you like haunted places, I think you might like The Horror of Dolores Roach, a new horror fiction podcast I found. The Horror of Dolores Roach tells a macabre urban legend of murder, betrayal, weed, gentrification, cannibalism, and survival of the fittest. When Dolores Roach returns to her old New York City neighborhood after 16 years in prison, she's stunned by all that's changed. The only person remaining from her previous life is Luis, an old stoner friend who gives her room and board in the basement underneath his dilapidated empanada shop. When the promise of her newfound stability is quickly threatened, Magic Hands Dolores is driven to extremes to survive. The Horror of Dolores Roach stars Daphne Rubin Vega and Bobby Cannavale and is written by Aaron Mark. I think it's a great podcast, but don't take my word for it. Refinery 29 says, The Horror of Dolores Roach stands out from the rest. It's totally fictional, but still equally chilling. You can listen to all episodes of The Horror of Dolores Roach now for free wherever you get your podcasts.
As the giant grew closer, Enceladus realized something was wrong. Instead of legs, Enceladus and his brother giants slithered on two large serpents with snapping maws where the feet should be. But this giant's serpents weren't snapping, and its face sagged. An arrow whizzed past Enceladus' face. This wasn't a giant. It was a god.
You foolish, foolish giant. No one rebels against the gods and escapes unscathed.
Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom, peeled off the face of a giant she'd flayed alive, revealing her own face, dripping with blood.
Parcast's New Mythology podcast dramatizes ancient myths for a modern audience and dives into their history, origins, and meaning. Hosted by my friend Vanessa Richardson, Mythology uses an ensemble cast to bring these stories to life. Every episode dramatizes an exciting story pulled from the beliefs of ancient cultures and gives insight into how our ancestors saw the universe. Stick around after this episode to hear a preview of Mythology's Part 1 on the Greek goddess Athena. New episodes come out every Tuesday. Search for and subscribe to Mythology wherever you listen to podcasts.
And now, let's continue the story. There are those that say the trees of Aokigahara have absorbed the tragic, restless spirits of the past, that the forest itself calls to them in dreams. But there is more to Aokigahara than ghosts. Japanese legend has no shortage of dark shapes that wait among the trees. Banri regretted killing Katsuji, but his child was missing, and Katsuji seemed the most likely suspect after everything he'd done. Banri had been in anguish for his son and wanted to hurt whoever had dared to take him. Katsuji had pled his innocence for hours as Banri tortured him. No matter what Banri did, cutting his skin, breaking his bones, Katsuji claimed he had nothing to do with it. It enraged Banri. He'd been so blinded by his own pain, he never stopped to consider that Katsuji had been telling the truth. When Banri was growing up, his grandfather told him a story about a samurai. The samurai was tasked with killing a criminal. If the criminal's last thoughts were of vengeance, he would become an onryo, a vengeful spirit, seeking the samurai's pain and ruin all his life. But the samurai was wise. He let the man bluster and threaten as much as he liked, then asked the man to give him proof of his ability to act from beyond the grave. The man agreed, teeth gritted in defiance. As he raised his weapon, he instructed the criminal to use his onryo to bite a stone after his head had rolled from his shoulders. The man swore he would bite the stone. The samurai removed the man's head in one swift blow. It fell, slick with blood, and bounced once, twice, right onto the stone, its teeth firmly embedded. The samurai's retainers were terrified, but the samurai wiped his blade clean and sheathed it for safekeeping. He explained to his men that he switched the criminal's thoughts from revenge to biting the stone. The samurai and his men were safe for all the days of their lives. And so Banri followed his example. He kept Katsuji without food or drink for hours. After endless sessions of torture, he offered Katsuji some water. As the man drank, thinking of nothing but his own thirst, Banri cut off his head. The next day, his son came home to him. He cried tears of relief as he hugged the boy tightly to his chest. The police had found him, and the man who had taken him. Katsuji really had been innocent. Banri had waited for the guilt to set in, but it didn't. Katsuji had been a good suspect. Banri had seen that look in his eyes, that darkness, Perhaps Banri had balanced the universe, and it had rewarded him by bringing his son home. That night, he was haunted by visions of a forest. Dark spirits roamed freely. They clawed at his skin with great white hands. He woke, covered in sweat, with scratch marks up and down his arms. In the morning, 2 books were sitting by his place at the table. Confused, he asked what they were. His wife told him they were crime novels he had ordered, but he had no memory of this. Banri cocked his head to look at the titles. Nami no Tou, Tower of Waves. Kuroi Jukai, The Black Sea of Trees. His son asked a question about his homework, and Banri returned to his breakfast. There was something about the novels that piqued his attention. He'd always loved detective stories, but this was something different. It was as though Kuroi Jukai was speaking to him, asking him to read its contents. With such a strong tie between the book and himself, he'd expected something other than an unsettling story about a string of suicides. When he got to the ending, he dropped the book. 2 lovers walked into a dense green forest and killed themselves. He knew this forest, the descriptions of the trees, the moss, the darkness. It was the woods at the seat of the sacred mountain, the forest in his dreams, Aokigahara. Although he tried to go through his normal routines, he couldn't shake the forest from his mind. The wind whispered its name to him. The forest seemed to appear in the windows of his train on his way to work. His friends were gripped by Kuroi Jukai and wanted to talk about the exciting ending. His boss suggested a hike to the ice caves near Aokigahara. The forest haunted him every hour of every day. He had escaped Katsuji's Onryo. There was no Onryo. He'd been silly to believe that in the first place. Yet the forest remained. He realized that despite his many, many dreams, he never went deeper into the woods. He began to recognize the same clearing, the gnarled roots that seemed to push out of the ground, urging their trees' canopies to block out the light. He was resolved then. Perhaps he could follow the tales of his childhood, find the glade, and lay whatever spirit was calling him to rest. He packed a bag and kissed his wife goodbye. He hugged his son once more, unsure if he would ever see either of them again. The bustling city fell away as Mount Fuji rose in the distance. The whispers of Aokigahara grew louder the closer he got. The trees seemed to sing to him. Sing. Or scream. He booked a room in a nearby inn, ignoring the girl at the desk brochures about ice caves and monks' sacred pilgrimages. He slept. But there were no peaceful dreams to soothe his anxious mind. Instead, he saw a creature with no face. It chased him through the woods. Icy fingers closed around his heart and squeezed. He woke with a start. As he approached the forest in the harsh light of day, he wondered if he was making the right decision. Everything appeared to be leading him here, but perhaps he could fight it a little longer. He tried to turn away and head back to his room, but his feet moved forward instead. He kept moving ahead. There was no one in sight, just him and a verdant wave of flora. It would have been peaceful, if not for the eerie stillness. He stepped into a land that didn't belong to the living. He knew that now. But something was compelling him to keep going. As the last vestiges of light were consumed, Banri finally felt the pain in his legs. He'd been moving non-stop for hours. His throat burned from dehydration. His stomach whined for food. He needed to stop and rest. Just a small rest. The forest floor was soft, and the moss was cool and soothing. He closed his eyes and dreamed of the sea. Evil for evil. The words were whispered into his ear, jolting him awake. His eyes struggled to adjust to the dark. There was something at his feet. It wasn't a person, but in the dark it almost looked like one. A bulbous head sat on top of a lopsided neck, deathly white, with an almost moon-like glow. Its eyes seemed to roll out of its head below its midnight dark eyebrows. A white shroud loosely encircled its skeletal neck. Bones stuck out from the body at odd angles, but its legs joined and ended in a wisp. An impossibly large, gaping mouth smiled, revealing rows and rows of sharp, white teeth. Red eyes stared at Bonri with an intensity he had never seen. Bonri tried to scream, but his vocal cords were still. He tried to scoot away from the creature, but he couldn't move. Like prey before a snake, he was frozen by its savage stillness. Sweat clung to his skin like frost. This was the thing that had been calling to him for weeks. This was Katsuji's vengeance, personified. The creature opened its mouth wider, splitting its head in half. And then, to his horror, Bonri realized it wasn't a shroud around the demon's neck. It was a bib. It lifted Bonri's feet with clawed, chalky hands. This wasn't vengeance. Not for Bonri. His grandfather had told him about these. Jikininki, hungry ghosts, corpse eaters, the cowards, the selfish, cursed to consume the dead. With one large bite, it began to swallow Bonri's flesh and bones. Our story will continue in a moment after a brief message. And now, back to haunted places. The Japanese government doesn't publicize the suicide statistics of Aokigahara anymore. Perhaps they hope to make a new history for the lush ecosystem the eruption of the sacred mountain left behind centuries ago. There are truly beautiful sights to be seen after walking past the warning signs along the trail. They're doing their very best to turn people who would harm themselves back toward help. There are ancient caves, natural wonders with spiritual significance. More than one Buddhist monk is said to have locked himself away in a cave here for ritual fasting, eventually becoming one with the sacred mountain. Mount Fuji itself is a site of massive spiritual power in Japanese tradition. If you don't practice Shinto or Buddhism, you might focus on the natural wonders that lie before you. You might not feel the power of this place, and you will surely regret it. When your friend Brian suggested a stroll into the sea of trees, you were apprehensive. Neither of you had ever been to Mount Fuji, and its legendary views were tempting. You read about the floor made of lava rocks and the different caves. It was a geological wonder, but it was also home to a darkness you knew you couldn't ever understand. You planned to walk quickly and quietly through these areas, like holding your breath as you passed a graveyard. The first thing you notice is the abandoned cars in the parking lot. The forest has begun to reclaim them. A pile of leaves, a punched one-way ticket to the area. No need to return. Now, you stand at the foot of one of the many winding trails, ready to enter. It's bright outside. There's a soft rustling of trees against the wind, and the errant call of a bird. Brian packed tape for the two of you to use, just in case you get lost. You hesitate to step forward, but he's already started down the trail, his backpack receding between the Japanese cypress and the five-needle pines. The silence takes you both by surprise. All the noise gets swallowed up by the volcanic rock beneath the soil, and you can't hear anything but your own breathing. The dense canopy above gives a sense of twilight, though it's only midday. The green of the trees stands out amidst the dark bark and the ground. They're fresh and alive, but the stillness makes you feel like you're in a painting. It's easy to count the signs of warning alongside the path. They're spaced out at even intervals, and each contains its own plea in kanji and kana. "Please consult the police before you decide to die," reads the sign closest to you. One further up ahead states, "Your life is a precious gift." They're everywhere. Large wooden engravings. Smaller signs hanging off thin ropes that keep you and Brian from wandering through the more upsetting parts of the forest. The path becomes harder to discern. You tape a ring around a nearby cypress and gently begin tugging on the roll of blue painter's tape as you and Brian walk further into the lush green. There's a glimmer of white just off the path. Before you can stop him, Brian has left the trail, bringing the tape with him, hanging it on the trees. You take off after him, carefully. Trash is scattered on the path in front of you. Old shoes, children's toys, pieces of stray garbage. Some of them are covered in a smattering of green. A book in white and black decomposes on the forest floor. You know enough kanji to see that it's a manual of some kind. The words, "to die," assault your vision. The last clear words on the wet pages. Brian says it's clearly the leavings of bad campers. You know camping isn't allowed here. You look behind you, hoping to see how far the two of you have come, but the trees blur together. Your head swims as you try to make sense of the tangled shapes that blend together in the limited light. It's impossible to say where you are, but you know that if you just go back to the path, you should be fine. You have the tape. The anguish of the scream stops you both in your tracks. You share a brief look before you both take off running toward the sound, not even knowing why. You fly over the thin ropes that are meant to keep you safe, dashing through the forest toward the sound. The blue tape falls to the ground as you try to yank it along the way, breaking with a deafening snap. You stop for a second to get your bearings. The scream was faint, but you know that you heard it. You stop to listen again. There's only silence. Quiet as a temple. You turn around, trying to figure out where you came from. "What do you think?" you say to the empty air next to you. Brian is gone. You scream his name loudly, hoping that he'll call back to you. You were both running in this direction, right? Or was it the opposite direction? You yell again, your vocal cords straining with the effort. It's like you're underwater. Another scream cuts through the silence. You aren't sure if it's the one that started you running or your friend calling out to you. It doesn't much matter at this point. You run as fast as you can toward the sound. You leap over a yellowing skull and empty set of clothes as you chase the sound farther and farther into the crowded forest. You hear nothing outside of the scream and the crunch of your hiking boots. And then, the scream is gone. You remember the tape that you could have followed back through the path. Now, it's lost. And so are you. there's no sign of your friend. You survey your surroundings. There are photographs and notes nailed to the trunks of the trees. A small statue, nearly overtaken by the green. The old-growth trees seem to lift themselves off the ground, crawling toward the sky. The perfect hiding place for another set of abandoned belongings. Roots entwine themselves together, forming a mossy carpet, almost like a coral reef. Nothing looks familiar. No new tracks or broken branches to suggest someone else had recently run through here. You're utterly alone. You try to pull your compass out, but your shaking hands send it falling to the ground. You bend down to pick it up, studying the dial of the compass as it points toward the east. The forest is less than 14 square miles. If you keep walking straight, you'll eventually find a way out and get some help. As you start to head east, you notice the compass is now pointing south instead. Frustrated, you shove the faulty thing in your pocket and try to think of another solution. You scream Brian's name once more. No response. He always tried to be the hero. You glance toward the canopy of the trees, trying to figure out just how long you've been in here. Time moves slower in the silence, and the daylight is a fickle, flighty thing. It could have been minutes or hours as you stare into the dizzying mass of trees and try to figure out just what to do. Hopelessness weighs your body down as you pick a direction and keep moving. If you can just find those signs again, you'll be all right. The guidebook said that volunteers patrol the grounds. They'll find you. Eventually. Something passes by you, too fast for you to make out. Part of you worries that you're hallucinating, but with no other options, you change position again and head toward the blob of white that sailed past you. Perhaps it's the fleeing sun. The shape stays just out of your sightline, always at the periphery. You catch quick glimpses of it and turn to study. Each time you turn, it's already moved farther ahead. You fix your gaze to where you think it will appear, waiting for something to happen. Your patience is rewarded. Black spots on a cloud of white. A faint outline of something that used to be human. What is it now? You can't be sure. You hear the crunch of footsteps behind you and hesitate to turn around. If you stop staring at this thing in front of you, you know that it will disappear. But it's shifted focus to whatever is behind you, which gives you no choice but to look. As you spin around, you catch a flash of the white creature moving again. A Buddhist monk stands before you. His kind smile feels out of place in this cold and isolating space. He reaches out to shake your hand, wordless. The warmth of his skin against yours puts your mind at ease. The guide had said they wander the woods, hoping to console and save the hopeless. You want to protest that you aren't hopeless, just lost. But you get the feeling he already knows. He walks you through the forest. He keeps your pace steady, and you start to see the large signs again. You step back over the ropes and onto the safe trail once more. You head out of the forest as fast as your legs will carry you, not wanting to risk another strange encounter. When you get back to the forest entrance, there's still no sign of Brian. He can't have vanished into thin air. He must be waiting for you nearby. You turn to speak to the monk, but he's already retreated into the woods, off to help someone else. Your legs are sore from running, and you're more than a little disoriented. But you find your way to the police station near the trail entrance. You head inside and speak to the first person you can find. Your voice shakes slightly as you tell the man in staccato Japanese that your friend is missing. The woman at the desk looks at you skeptically. Did you say something wrong? You tell her one of the monks brought you back. You desperately hope you're using the right honorifics. She stares at you for a long moment, and you feel a tremble go down your spine. There are no monks or guides in the forest today. Your knees give out, and you fall to the floor. You don't know who walked you back to where you came from, or why. But there is a gnawing in the pit of your stomach, an unease that spreads through your entire body. Brian is gone, and he's not coming back. When Mount Fuji erupted in 864, nearly wiping out the population of what would later be called the Yamanashi Prefecture, the emperors quickly divined the cause. The Shinto priests had been derelict in their worship of Mount Fuji's deity, Asama no Akami. The region is now filled with over 1,000 Asama shrines. They offer protection against the public's destruction, but haven't been able to cleanse the forest of its private pain. Aokigahara is a place of great sorrow, but it's also filled with life. The urban legends describe it as a forest without birdsong, but there are birds, bears, deer, mink, foxes, mice, and numerous kinds of flora, from the ground to the top of the canopy. So don't be too upset if you hear a branch crack in the woods. It might not be a jinkiniki or an oreo. Just make sure you leave the forest the way you found it, or you may not leave it at all. Thanks for listening to Haunted Places. Don't forget to subscribe to Haunted Places on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or any other podcast directory. If you like what you hear, leave a 5-star review, or tell us what you think on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram as @Parcast, and Twitter @Parcast Network. It seems simple, but it really helps our show. A new episode comes out every Thursday. We'll see you next week. Haunted Places was created by Max Cutler. It is a production of Cutler Media and is part of the Parcast Network. It's produced by Max and Ron Cutler. Sound design by Ron Shapiro. Production assistance by Maggie Admire and Carly Madden. Haunted Places is written by Lilda Ritter and Jennifer Rashi. I'm Greg Polson.
And now, please enjoy this preview of Mythology's first episode on the Greek goddess Athena.
It was foolish to challenge the gods. After battling the goddess Athena for 3 days, Enceladus had all but resigned himself to the fate of so many of his fellow giants. But he'd escaped her for the moment, and perhaps that would become his advantage. Enceladus had barely caught his breath when he heard the horses. He whipped around, worried Athena had tracked him to the Ionian Sea, but it was one of Enceladus' own, another giant. As the giant grew closer, Enceladus realized something was wrong. Instead of legs, Enceladus and his brother giants slithered on 2 large serpents with snapping maws where the feet should be. But this giant's serpents weren't snapping, and its face sagged. An arrow whizzed past Enceladus' face. This wasn't a giant. It was a god.
You foolish, foolish giant. No one rebels against the gods and escapes unscathed.
Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom, peeled off the face of a giant she'd flayed alive, revealing her own face, dripping with blood. She kept the skin wrapped around her like a cloak. Enceladus's leg serpents snapped and spit at Athena, but their fangs couldn't pierce the hide of his own kind. It was a perfect shield. Athena knocked Enceladus into the Ionian Sea. Then she crouched down and lifted the entire isle of Sikolos. Athena had a divine, godly strength. Plucking an island out of the ocean was as easy for her as it was for a man to pick up his child. Athena straightened up, raising the island above her. She swung it around over Enceladus and slammed the island on his head. Enceladus crumpled under the blow of the island. He sank and then vanished beneath the landmass. His blood and anger rippled outward from the island. The place where Enceladus was defeated became Mount Etna, and the buried giant was reduced to expressing his wrath through eruptions and earthquakes. Yet something wasn't right. As she watched steam build above Mount Etna, Athena knew her heart was missing a piece. She'd used her wisdom and wit to defeat the enemy, embracing her role as a goddess of war, and it felt empty. She was destined for something greater. She was certain. Welcome to Mythology on the Parcast Network. Every Tuesday, we present dramatic stories from ancient mythology and explore their origins. I'm your host and narrator, Vanessa Richardson. Today we're focusing on the Greek goddess Athena. She's the goddess of war and military strategy, but also the goddess of wisdom, civilization, and the arts. In her mythology, she's caught between who she is and who she wants to be. New episodes of Mythology release every Tuesday, and you can find us and all of Parcast's podcasts wherever you listen to podcasts. At Parcast, we are grateful for you, our listeners. You allow us to do what we love. Let us know how we're doing. Reach out on Facebook and Instagram at Parcast and Twitter at Parcast Network. And if you enjoy today's episode, the best way to help us is to leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening. It really does help us. We also now have merchandise. Head to parcast.com/merch for more information. Something to note in these episodes, all Greek myths have many versions and variations. We've selected those we felt are the most dramatic and entertaining, and supplemented them with additional research into Greek traditions. Additionally, each Greek myth takes place in a wide expanded universe. While we'll cover some major myths of Athena over the next few episodes, this won't be her only appearance in the podcast. Goddess of the arts and of war, Athena exhibits a dichotomy in Greek culture. She's a woman warrior in a culture where women didn't go to war, and a household goddess who vowed to never be a lover or a mother. Athena is masculine, feminine, and something greater than both. She's a goddess for everyone, and a goddess for no one. Ancient Greek society had clear gender roles, treating women as second-class citizens. But Athena exists outside that construct. She'll skin a giant alive and then go weave a tapestry. She's as apt to teach men gardening and pottery as she is to help them slay their enemies. Unlike her half-brother and rival, Ares, the war god, Athena approaches war with logic and meditation. At the start of a battle, Ares leaps into action, while Athena waits, plans, then leads men to bloody victory. She values rational thinking over emotion, but is not without rage and bloodlust. Classicist Walter F. Otto characterized Athena as the goddess of nearness because she was always beside the Greek heroes in battle, guiding their spears and swords. She is, like all Greek gods, a killer. However, Athena prefers to change errant humans into other forms, doling out punishments while preserving life. She also transforms herself, taking a male appearance multiple times in the Iliad and the Odyssey. That isn't to say she doesn't embrace a female role too. In today's myths, the building of the Palladium, the judgment of Paris, and the story of Arachne, Athena strives to be recognized as feminine, and this may be the hardest battle the goddess of war has ever fought. The king of the gods had a headache, and Zeus's son Hephaestus, like many children, was only making it worse. Hephaestus was god of the forge, born with a clubfoot. To him, a headache was nothing.
And then I realized I could put another axe head on my existing axe and kill 2 men with 1 blow. Genius, right?
Oh, my head is killing me.
That's the idea. Both heads could kill. 2 heads, 1 axe.
Zeus gestured to his forehead, frustrated.
It feels like my skull is expanding and contracting. Maybe I should go...
Oh, headache. I thought we were still on axe heads.
Zeus continued moaning as he dropped to the floor, gripped his head, and rocked back and forth. Hephaestus looked on, torn between sympathy and opportunity.
Anything I can do? Maybe take over your duties for a time? Not that a headache could ever take down the great god Zeus.
Oh, Hephaestus, will you... Oh.
Hephaestus eyed his brand new double-headed axe. Then Zeus doubled over in front of him. The opportunity was ripe. Zeus had overthrown Hephaestus' grandfather. Perhaps patricide ran in the family.
Oh, make it stop. End it. I'll cut off my head.
Hephaestus hid his grin as he grabbed his double-head axe. After today, the gods of Mount Olympus would bow to Hephaestus. He wound up and aimed straight for Zeus's skull. The axe cleaved Zeus's head in half. As Zeus's eyes spread wide apart, a battle helmet emerged from where his brain should have been. Hephaestus dropped his axe in shock as a fully armored warrior woman sprang from Zeus's head, shouting a battle cry. All thoughts of ruling Mount Olympus faded in the face of this fearsome, beautiful goddess. Ready for battle, Athena stepped out of her father's head and into the light of Mount Olympus. Athena was born without a mother, the child of Zeus alone. She emerged a rational adult, capable of complex thought, and ready to fight for her life. Yet because the Greek gods are modeled on humans, with human flaws and emotions, there is one story of Athena's childhood and a youthful accident that guided the rest of her life. Zeus was accustomed to his children having a mother, so after he fused his head back together, he wasn't sure what to do with Athena. Eventually, the single dad sent his new daughter away to be educated by his nephew, Triton. Triton was a fish-tailed ocean god, so Athena spent much of her time in and around water, and more of her time with Triton's daughter, Pallas. Pallas was a water nymph, a maiden of the ocean, and Athena's only friend. But today, the war goddess and the water nymph raised their swords, squaring off against each other. The pair sparred on the surface of a lake. Pallas floated amid a column of waves, her long hair and shimmering fishtail distracting from her killer aim. Athena defended herself from atop a sleek raft, wearing armor as always. She pushed her sword forward, calling out her moves as she executed them.
Striking, stabbing,
Dodging.
ducking, and slicing.
Lunging.
As Pallas lunged, Athena used her shield to knock Pallas over. Rising from the waves, Pallas spit water into Athena's face.
Hey!
Pallas spouted more water, somehow forming it into perfect concentric circles, like aquatic smoke rings. Athena couldn't help but laugh.
Pallas, be serious. My father's coming to watch us spar tomorrow. We have to impress him.
You have to impress him. If I impress him, you know where I'll end up. And my father won't be happy about that.
You're filthy.
You've heard the stories, and you have 100 half-siblings to prove it.
37. I have 37 half-siblings.
That's an army, warrior goddess.
Let's go again. I want to get that spinning parry right.
Athena was quite skilled in combat. It helped that she took to it naturally, like Pallas to water. She'd been ecstatic to hear Triton declare that they were finally good enough to spar in front of Zeus. The proud fathers had invited a crowd of gods, nymphs, and even a few mortals they fancied. Rowing out onto the lake, Athena fiddled with her helmet. She knew her armor made her look ferocious, but she still felt like a child in a woman's body. What if she fell off her raft? What if her mind went blank and she froze? What if her father, the king of the gods, thought she was only average? A terrifying column of water arose from the depths. Inside it, Pallas. She met Athena's eye and flashed a quick smile. Athena relaxed. She wasn't alone. She had Pallas. With her best friend beside her, Athena had nothing to worry about. They began to spar. In the audience, Zeus watched intently. Next to him, his wife, Hera, the goddess of marriage, looked around, intent in a different way.
Aphrodite has such a nice nose, don't you think?
Sure. That's it. Slice and dodge. Well done.
You've never noticed it?
I guess it's fine, if you like noses.
It looks quite like Athena's.
Don't start on this again.
I don't understand why you...
She's going to fall in the water.
A wave crashed over Athena, soaking her. Athena slipped, but kept her footing on the raft.
Come on, Athena. You can do it. Get back up there. Raise that sword. You'll win this yet.
They aren't actually fighting. It's a mock spar.
At the end of which, my daughter will win.
Zeus nervously watched Athena struggle through the next few maneuvers.
She's going to fall and embarrass us.
Us? She does have a mother. I knew it.
I meant Athena and myself.
As Zeus worried, Athena relaxed into the rhythm of the spar. She breathed deeply as she pressed her shield against Pallas's sword. Her instincts took over. Suddenly, a new heat rushed through Athena's veins. She'd never felt this warrior power before, but it possessed her. Her feet danced more nimbly. Her sword twisted more sharply. She tasted metal in her mouth. For the first time, she might want to kill. Across the lake, Zeus adjusted his shield. The sun gleamed off of it. Getting an idea, he tilted his shield, aiming the ray of light at Pallas. In the water, the light caught Pallas's eye. She looked up. Meanwhile, Athena stabbed toward Pallas's heart, a final flourish. The perfectly executed move she was born for. This was her gift, combat. Athena lunged, expecting Pallas to dodge as they had rehearsed. She didn't notice that Pallas's face was tilted up, distracted. Pallas looked toward Zeus as Athena's sword pierced her heart. Instead of blood, water flowed from Pallas's wound. She shrank, dissolving, until all that was left were her eyes, which transformed into two wiggling minnows. Pallas was dead. If you enjoyed listening to this preview of our episode on Athena and want to hear the rest of it, search and subscribe to Mythology wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes release every Tuesday.